All right, and that brings us to our final album for the
Yep.
evening. It's gonna be like lightning quick. We gotta do this in under an hour, Josh.
Yeah, maybe.
Amazing. So this is "Songs of Faith and Devotion" by Depeche Mode. It comes in at number 168 in the 1990s on Best Ever Albums, number 17 in 1993, number 893 of all time. It's Depeche Mode's fourth highest rated album, behind 1986's Black Celebration, which was an album we did not cover in the 80s.
Nope.
But we did cover the next two, 1987's Music for the Masses and 1990's Violator.
Yep.
So we did that one
Yeah,
last season.
Music for the Masses was on episode 23 of last season, and Violator was on our first episode this season.
There you go. So should I take the first? Let me do the first take
why
on
don't
this
you
one.
take the first take this time?
Okay. So I didn't know any of the songs on this. Actually, I thought that I would have. I was kind of surprised by that. My wife Sherry's like, "Oh, is that?" She knew automatically. She's like, "Oh, is that the one that I Feel You's on?" I said, "Yeah." She's like, "Oh, I love that song." I was like, "Okay," and that of course was a single, and I maybe I heard it in the ether somewhere, but I didn't really remember it. So kind of like going along the lines of what covering with Tool. This is a dark sounding record, darker than Violator, right? Because you did Violator, and I think Depeche Mode is always going to have kind of the very nature of Depeche Mode is like kind of a darker, melancholy, type of vibe,
introspective, like Outcast type of band. I think that's what we said talking about those other albums, and a big fan base too, a devoted fan base. I think.
Yes. Right. That's right. They've sold like over 100 million copies of records. Yeah. So they're in the Hall of Fame, and that's what John said, right? He's like, I know all these. He's like, who are these people that love Depeche Mode? And then he would randomly meet like people throughout his life being like huge Depeche Mode fans. Right. So. I think I've yet to meet one. That person's like, I love Depeche Mode, but they're clearly they are out there.
I think I remember my cousin being a big Depeche Mode fan. He's older than me, probably by like 10, maybe 8 years or something like that.
Yeah, that's kind of in the line with all this stuff. So, so the first word that came to my mind was industrial, right? And I don't remember if we talked about this when we talked about them before, but this is kind of got like a Nine Inch Nails vibe to it in terms of like the production and the sound. It's a very synthetic, but it's a specific kind of synthetic sound. It's just you feel like you're in a warehouse somewhere and they're like, I don't know, like making sheet metal or like this like pounding sounds and stuff like that. But it's got this very it's like an industrial type sound.
And that's how I felt with Violator too, I think, if I recall.
Yeah, it is there. Maybe I was just more familiar with Violator, and I think that I don't know. Violator had more. Was certainly. I mean, for me, it was clearly a better record than what this was. And the highs on that were just like, I mean, Personal Jesus is just like, I don't know if they can beat that, for my money. So they had a lot of other songs that I just was a little bit more familiar with, and but this did seem a little bit darker too, I think, and maybe the industrial nature of the record came out a little bit more with that. But yeah, again, it's dramatic, it's kind of very, it's got a full sound. There's a lot of heft to this record, and. Generally I liked it. There's also like weaving in other weird things, like there's gospel in this. There's like moments of getting this kind of choir behind him, or these harmonies that are happening behind him in a song like Condemnation. And it's
Get Right
like,
With Me also has a gospel.
Yes.
Feel.
Yep. So there's there's like, okay, we're gonna throw in some gospel music, and then like, and in One Caress, the penultimate song, right? I wanted to say it was a four piece, a string quartet, but there's more than that, right? It's clearly more violins and cellos and basses behind it, but it's
or orchestra or something.
It's orchestral, yeah. It's like a big orchestral song. And he's got like this in times like intense vocals that are happening. It's a very emotional record, I felt like. And there was some interesting, like I thought with Get Right With Me, there was an interesting juxtaposition because the bass and the drums were like this very heavy kind of, heavy dark, not heavy like heavy metal, but like a darker kind of feel. And then the guitar came in with the vocals and they were a lighter feel. So it kind of like this weird balance between a lighter sounding song and a darker sounding song. So I thought that was interesting. So overall, I think I do like this, especially on the headphones, because it did a lot of the back and forth, the left to right fading and stuff like that. So there's a lot of cool effects there. But I don't know if there was what was the song that maybe was it In Your Room? Yeah, I think that was probably the standout track to me. That and I Feel You, because I felt like In Your Room.
I think those were the singles.
And it makes sense, right? Like it's In Your Room had a really. I liked the end of that. They had a really good groove that they found, and they kind of stayed with it for like a couple of minutes. Yeah. So I was kind of bobbing my head to that song and be like, all right, I got what you're doing here. Oh, and Judas, was there bagpipes in there? I felt a little like James Horner sound from like the Titanic soundtrack what else did he do? Braveheart, right? It's kind of got that the whistle or the bagpipes in the background. So there's clearly, Depeche Mode, they're throwing a lot of stuff at it, but it's still very much in the line of the kind of like the electronic industrial type sound. And, I still, David Gahan's voice is really good. It fits well with here. I don't know if I would always want to listen to this. This is a little bit of a record that I think might be a little bit of a mood record. Whether it's an evening or a time you're just feeling a little down and you just want something, you want to sit with that for a little bit and kind of just let some big sounds kind of overwhelm you, if you will. I think that could probably work here as well. But for my money, it just didn't. It makes sense that it's not as high as an album like Violator, or that it's kind of in their fourth highest rated album, at least on Best Ever Albums. But still very solid, I think. I think too. So yeah, I'd go slight thumbs up on this one for me.
Yeah, this certainly lives up to the name of the album, Songs of Faith and Devotion, because this is almost like a concept record. I feel like every song, and I really, for some reason, I was drawn to the lyrics on this.
Okay.
Every song has, well, even in the names of the titles, like Judas or Condemnation, there's a lot of biblical and religious references and words peppered throughout.
Yes.
And the themes of the songs are religious in nature, and like you said, the gospel stuff, I picked up on that. There's a hymnal quality to these songs, like on Condemnation. That almost like sounded like a Christmas song at times, like in the backing in one of the serious Christmas songs. Or the biblical Christmas songs,
right? It's the serious ones, yeah.
And and on top of that, there's like kind of these metaphors for sex and love mixed in with those references. So like on Feel You, if you'll look, like he's saying like when kingdom comes and other things that have biblical meanings, but he could also be like talking about love and sex. And so it's like this weird like cross section or weaving of like kind of dichotomous feelings. I guess if you're really like pious and religious, maybe they are kind of the same, but yeah. I don't think that's what he's going for. I think he's going for that kind of more interesting or provocative type of feeling to it. And that happens throughout, like the walking in my shoes. That's you can kind of see that as like Jesus related in some ways. And he talks about absolution and repentance. Those are words that come up in that song.
Yeah.
And so that happens throughout. And I kept dialing in on that for some reason, listening to this album. And like, so then I just was reading the lyrics as I was listening the second time. And like the other Depeche Mode songs, it's very like kind of dark and moody. It's a little like emo. It's a little like writing in your diary type of like woe is me in some sort of way.
Yeah.
Like,
sad bastard music.
Yeah. Although he doesn't sing like sad or woeful.
Right.
It's
right.
more like you're in a church or something. That's kind of the vibe I got on this album. Like hearing this being performed in a church would be like a weird, like cool experience, I feel like.
Yeah.
And you're right. It is dark and industrial, but I feel like it's like almost responding to like where music is at with like grunge and everything too. In that way, it's not like Nine Inch Nails or Tool industrial. I never.
Right.
It's kind of a fine line, I guess, but I don't. We talked about another album recently that was like way more industrial than this. Sometimes when I think of industrial music, I'm like thinking of Stomp, like we're smashing trash cans and like stuff like that.
Was that like junkyard music? Yeah.
So that doesn't ring true for me here, but
Mm-hmm.
I thought this was definitely an interesting listen, and the lyrics and all of that, and kind of the religious themes that carried throughout. Even at the end, Higher Love, that's another track, like higher love,
Yep.
like God, higher love, like Jesus, like whatever, spiritualism in general. So it's all woven throughout. And from that perspective, I found it like really interesting, and like kind of an interesting exercise in trying to do something like that. We don't have a lot of albums, pop rock albums, or, you know, mass culture albums that try and do something like that would be like accepted, or you know, people would like, I guess. I think I like Violator, Music for the Masses, more than this still. I think that the hits on some of those other ones are just like way stronger, and you know, like you said, Personal Jesus is like an all-timer, so it's hard to beat that. But definitely like the highlights are probably In Your Room and I Feel You off of this one, and there's some other ones too that I liked. I liked Walking in My Shoes. So
I liked Rush too. Rush seemed a little like misplaced a little bit, but it also, like, as soon as it came on, I was like, ooh, like I peaked up a little bit. I don't know. I just felt like that it was a very specific. It was almost more of a dance type song in a way. The way that the drums kind of came in there, but it was very. And it was, you know, still very synthetic, but it just had a cool groove, and I liked some of the effects that they were throwing there too. So that stood out a little bit to me as well.
What I was thinking about too, listening to this, was I'm surprised the like British kind of electronic underground baggy culture trip hop stuff had carried over to them yet. I feel like that would have been an influence at some point, or maybe they have influenced those bands that we've talked about. And, you know, even like that Bjork album with the electro pop kind of sound, I feel like maybe they have future albums where that comes into play more. I would have thought that there would have been some like cross-cultural, you know, mingling there or something, but that they're kind of really still staying in their lane. And like, you know, it's definitely a Depeche Mode album, right? It's like definitely their sound. You know it right away when you hear it. And, so I'll be interested. I don't think we talk about them anymore, but I would wonder if I know the one guy leaves the band finally after kind of stressful touring. And
I think it was after this record, one of them left, and then they became a 3-piece.
Andy Wilder, I think.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Alan Wilder.
Unless we cover them in a bonus episode, no. I mean, we're not slated to do that. They had a bunch of albums, and I mean, they've been around for like the early '80s. They had like an album in '81. You know, like, so. Yeah. It's interesting too, because, you know, between this and Tool, you know, to a lesser, Matthew Sweet was probably, even though he was kind of retro, you know, kind of wearing his influences on his sleeves, but, you know, but still, like, there was something about his music that was still kind of the 90s, like alt rock or college rock kind of vibe that was still kind of in the ether. Like Depeche Mode and Tool were kind of doing their, you know, Depeche Mode kept doing what they had been doing, right, which is still more of an 80s vibe for them than you know, and then Tool is just doing something kind of very different. And so, like, you know, within the context of the 90s being more alt rock and grunge kind of being the predominant, you know, popular genres of rock, at least at that time, it's like they're not really fitting in either of those categories. But they still were massive hits, right? You know, they still sold a lot and whatnot. So, but you're right. I mean, it still sounds very much like a Depeche Mode record. And I'm not terribly familiar with what they've done afterwards. If they do kind of go into a different direction, I want to say I don't think so. I can't recall hearing a Depeche Mode song that wasn't somewhat like sounding like this. But I certainly don't know enough, and I certainly don't know enough about their earlier stuff to know about the progression of what led them to here.
Well, they're early on when they had that early hit. And it's wild that they've been around more than a decade at this point. By this time, this album, like they were like teenagers, I think, when that first album came out, and that's like pure like kind of like dance early 80s dance music
Right.
type of sound.
Right.
So
yeah,
they have evolved in some way, but
they got darker. Yeah.
yeah, but they're in a far different, I don't know, when they're in a different place than Tool is in terms of longevity by this point.
Oh, sure.
And
well, Tool is just getting started, really.
Right, exactly. So
yeah.
And this tour that they went on is 14 months long. That's like crazy. So
yeah,
that's popular if you can sustain a tour for over a year.
Yeah, that's like half of the Use Your Illusion tour.
Right.
Less than half, or yeah, probably, but yeah.
I mean, that's probably like Taylor Swift levels of fame, or I don't think she even tours for a year, or like Beyonce.
No, she's got to do because today, she's just putting out singles, and that's the thing, right? An artist didn't tour on one album for well over a year.
Right.
It's not, or at least like the Janet Jackson thing, right? Where she has one album has number one singles in 3 different years because it stays with it for so long, and they just ride that for so long. It doesn't really. I don't think it really. I mean, an artist can still go a long time between albums, but it's not. I don't. Yeah, I think the industry's changed a little bit.
Well, I saw here too that "I Feel You" was the first single that was released February '93, and their last single "In Your Room" was released January of '94. So they're releasing singles like over a year span, which is crazy. Bands probably had it better then in some ways.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, they actually sold records.
Yeah.
Instead of getting royalties, like 2-cent royalties from Spotify every time their song plays.
That's why Matthew Sweet has to sell cat art.
He does have to sell cat art. Yeah. To supplement it, which is, but more power to him. But yeah, I just want to hear the hits, man. But
yeah, so I think sounds like mild thumbs up for this album.
I enjoyed it. I think it more it's more of an album like at a certain time and place, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Which is fine. I love albums like that. It's just but yeah, I also don't think it had the strength of it didn't have the catch. It wasn't grabbing me the way that Violator did,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.